Welcome back, folks, to episode 154 of the Running Man Self-Regulation Skills Project podcast with me, your host, Dr. Armando Dominguez, PhD in health psychology, licensed professional counselor, and an adjunct professor at a local community college. And what I'd like to do first is let you know that this has been a really important week for me in that finally the Running Man Human Stress Model book is out and in publish at Amazon. Now, this isn't going to be a typical commercial by my book, but what I am going to do is cover what it is that this book provides, so that way those of you that have been on this journey with me here on the 15th of July is going to be 3 years of the Running Man podcast, and the culmination of this book is one of very amazing to me, because it's been many years that I've been putting this model together. And this model is also a system of managing and self-regulating how it is that we respond to stress in our lives. This is a very human accessible book in the sense that it's not jargon heavy, but it also teaches you how to deal with things whenever things get really dicey, really stressful. And the goal of this book and why I'm releasing this is to alleviate the suffering. Many of us experience pain, and in life there is pain, but how we relate to that pain can equate to suffering in many cases, and that is what the goal of this book is about. This isn't about me, it's much bigger, because even though I'm not going to be here anymore at some point in the far future, hopefully, this book can be around here and still help people, and that's the goal, because many of the things that are in this book work together, and they work well together, and as pieces and parts individually, they can all be taken and used and gain benefit. But the synergy of the Running Man human stress model that I teach is one that I have heard for many years, almost 20 years now, that has changed lives. Just having somebody explain someone to someone that's in pain or struggling with addiction, anxiety, panic, or post-traumatic stress reactivity, even up to the disorder level, and people that struggle with mood disorders, learning how to manage stressful events from the inside out, but also being able to recognize stress in someone else so as to be able to avoid and strategically approach and create communication when necessary, so that way they don't enter when it's the worst time to do it, whenever it's high stress. Not going to convince anybody of changing their mind whenever they're under stress, especially if they're in survival mode, and knowing how to improve communications. Now, the reason I'm going to start with this and continue throughout this podcast is that I want everyone to know, like I've been promising, that this book was coming, it's coming, it is here. Now, it is active on Amazon now. It's under the title, The Running Man, Resiliency in the Face of Fight or Flight. I'm redoing the cover. We are, my editor and I'm letting it be sold right now until we update the cover here probably into this week. There's a reason behind that, because one, this knowledge needs to be in the hands of people that can use it. And two, when the cover comes out, there's not going to be any content change. It's solid. It is solid. I've worked many years on this, and even my editor, whenever she read it, she said she liked it. And she's pretty picky about those sorts of things that are good. And she's been a professional publisher for many, many years, and I trust her judgment. But that also validated me in knowing that what I'd written and the way I'd written it was not only easy to read, but also communicates a very important idea. I've already had a couple of reviewers tell me that the way I wrote this, and this was intentional, was that it was like they were hearing their own self-talk in their own mind about what it is going on from the perspective of if I'm experiencing stress, anxiety, panic, or the sudden onset of fight-flight. And that is a very unique thing about this book, in that the way it is written, it's not like long paragraph narrative. Some of it looks like bullet points, but they're all very simple instructives. But it's almost like read along, and you're in the observer position in some cases. Then all of a sudden I'm reading this and, oh, that's me. And it's like your own self-talk and your self-observation. So this is a very important, distinguished way of doing things, because it makes it very personal, but it's also one where it's autogenic. That means that I am conditioning myself to learn and think in this way versus the old ways that weren't working so well. They were inducing panic, anxiety, stress, and post-trauma reactivity. And there was a purpose to this, and that's why it took so long to get it out. And I have to be patient with myself. I wanted this out like yesterday, last year, but that's okay. It's out. And even though we're going to change the cover, if you see it in the original cover, that means you'll have a special edition. But once the second cover comes out, once again, there's not going to be any change to the content itself. It is solid and it stands as it is. And the only thing we're changing that cover for is just a preference in term. But beyond that, it's going to be something that I want to see in your hands. And if you know people that can benefit from this podcast, they can benefit from the book even more and take it with them where their podcast can't go. Electricity goes down, and if you have a hard copy of this book, you're golden. All you need is a little light and a candle or whatever. But the idea was I want this to be long-lasting. There's going to be an ebook variant of it coming out here shortly once we get the second cover ironed out. And also on top of that, we're also going to be pushing out a Spanish version of this book, and we're probably going to be looking to see how we can get it translated into other languages as well. I've had a few people overseas already telling me that they want to read the book, and that says a lot to me, especially from certain professionals and also other psychologists, and that tells me a lot. But this does not mean that it's for therapists and psychologists. This is for the person, the consumer, the everyday person, and it's not written in any way that's like high language or psychologically requiring you to have a degree to make sense of these things. And much of this is founded in not only physiology, but psychology, social dynamics, and also from stress inoculation type methodologies that over years allowed me to see through a different lens. And the perceptions that precede our best thinking, whenever our best thinking goes out the window, that's whenever the Running Man model shines. And that's why I wrote it. I will tell the story. I think I've mentioned it once. I was working at a mental hospital once, and I was teaching. Most people were kind of bugged out by the fact that I would teach on a whiteboard in a mental hospital to people that had seen the worst day of their lives. And this isn't just for people that struggle with mental illness. This is for everyone. And we all struggle with stress. And whenever I had this one lady, and I'll always remember her face and what she asked. I don't remember her name, and I couldn't give that out anyway. But I remember. She said, I've been in and out of hospitals for over 30 years. And mind you, she was in her late 60s at the time. And she told me, you have just answered every question I had about myself. What happens to me, when it happens to me, why it occurs. Now I understand. I realize I'm not fundamentally flawed. I'm not broken. She was under an extreme amount of stress. And that is where the Running Man model was born. Because she says, what do I read? Where do I go so I can learn this, what you taught me? And there were other people around at the time. And I said, it's not just one book. She said, I need to know something. There's got to be a book somewhere. I said, ma'am, I am the book. And this is where she told me, you need to write that book. We need to get our hands on it. It has to be out there. This has made a huge difference. That was the impetus to get this collected. Now, the gathering of the info started many years before I'd ever met her, or even many years before I ever became a professional anything or anyone. I was a martial artist first. I was in the military, and I started gathering bits of information. Some of it didn't come later until I had matured into my intelligence, so to speak, so I could understand what it is I was putting together in the first place, but I knew there was something driving me in that direction. And this book is a culmination of many years. There's nothing hokey about this, nothing mumbo-jumbo, nothing psycho-spiritual, anything. It may affect those things indirectly, but I will tell you they're all very practical, useful tools, and they're easy to use. But I will tell you, this isn't just a one read in the sense that, and you can get it in one read, mind you. It might take you a few days, but it's not going to be something that you'll understand right away, because some of this requires practice in the sense that you have to repeat it and do it. And some of it is mindset, and some of it is physiological tools, such as learning how to do, for instance, the neurological sign, the box breath, and also some other centering exercises. And this isn't doing breathing like everyone else does. And it really irritates me whenever I hear people tell me, well, I've done the breathing. It's like, no, you haven't. You've been told to breathe. You've been told to breathe by somebody that may not be an exemplar or a practitioner of. And you may have been told to do that because, well, here, I saw it in a book, try this. And it's prescriptive here, do what I say. Versus I've seen this work and I've put it to work. And the people that I used to teach this to, we would test it on site. We would take pulses before and after, for instance, before we do a certain breathing method, the score breath in this particular instance. And then we take an after pulse, and we would do it from 15 seconds to 30 seconds to a minute and a half at the longest, but I wouldn't tell them when, because I wanted them to be able to use it at that moment and not know when to shut it off, because in life, events shut off when they shut off. They're things that aren't necessarily always in our immediate control, and these tools work, where we had drops in heart rate, immediate drops in heart rate between 10 to 12 beats a minute on the average, and some at the highest up to 30 beats per minute dropped. So what does the Running Man model, human stress model, represent? The Running Man system? Well, it represents things that we can use strategically, not only as breathing, but also mindset, also approach and knowing, timing, being aware of that. But also it's a triage of self-reported symptoms of stress, how it happens, what I'm feeling at the moment, and what it feels like whenever I hear something. Knowing triggers, this sort of thing. We become more self-aware, not just aware of our immediate environment, external, outside of our skin, but to what's going on within the internal environment from the skin in. And it's not discontinuous from the pressure outside that causes those things to fly within us. So as far as the focus of this, it's a nervous system regulation, and it's somatic founded in the sense that we pay attention to our body. So by default, it's physiology first before it's ever psychology, which means once we become aware of those symptoms of stress that we may be reporting, also the signs of stress, what some other people would see, will go down. There are many folks that I do speak with that once they come and talk to me, for instance, and they're under stress or they have anxiety, they flush. Sometimes they have like marks on their neck that look red. There's some wherever their cheeks flush and they get nervous or start sweating and get fidgety, can't sit still. Those are signs and symptoms of fight flight. Even though they may not be in danger, the body is still responding to those things that are pressuresome or need done as if they are somehow a threat. Even though may not be endangered, the thing is the threat is still there and they're responding to it as if. So who is this for? For people that want to think clearly whenever the pressure is on. This is something that isn't just about thinking and thought process, but figuring out, well, what derails it? What happens whenever I get stressed out and the heart rate goes up? Well, one of the first things I fundamentally have taught for many years is that the blood flow leaves the frontal lobe. That means we have less blood sugar to do the requisite thinking. The same blood sugar that we use to get physical, well, where is it going? It's going to the peripheral structures, our arms and legs, so we can fight and flee and run if we must and climb if we have to. And that means our capacity to do math 101 in the sense I'm doing 1 + 1 = 2, that gets harder. I can still do it. It's just that my IQ drops temporarily about 10 to 14% on the average. But what if it's an above average threat and stress? Well, if I'm overwhelmed, then we're talking something that can go up to about 30%. And that means we have an average IQ of 95 to 105 drop to close to about 75 or 80, then that means that I am now approaching what would be considered the cutoff range for a high-functioning person that's struggling with intellectual developmental disability. And this is no knock on them, but this is something that we have to look at as far as in the calibration sense, factually, that I can now function at that level, which is not great whenever I'm trying to problem solve under great duress or stress or pain for that matter. And we have to be aware of it. Now, inversely, if you are jumping around and having a good time in the bouncy house and your heart rate is up, you get an equivalence. You may not see things in such a dark lens, but you will notice the difference in that you might be a little dopey and make dumb decisions and may actually do something that may look impulsive and not in your best interest considering the future, because you're not able to bind time. You can't make plans in that sense. And all you're thinking about is having fun in the moment, and you can kind of figure stuff out based on what you've experienced in the past, or else you would be doing what you're doing. But we can't really plan forward. We can fear forward. But as far as the positive planning and knowing what will come up next and be able to benefit from that, not so much. But some other stuff that I do mention in this book is that as far as whenever we're anxious, our brain becomes conditioned in a certain way. We can also condition it to respond better than in the elevated anxiety mode. Now, I'm going to drop on the physiology first thing that everybody that lives, anybody that has life in their body has anxiety. Now, what do I mean by that? When people think about anxiety, usually they call it anxiety when they're really talking excessive anxiety and really the fight-flight response. What we're talking about is vigilance moving towards hypervigilance, not unlike what happens with PTSD. And that means feeling not only threatened, but under threat to the degree that we may become combative or worse. So these are some things to pay attention to, but what is anxiety? The finite definition, and I give credit to my anatomy and physiology teacher from back in grad school, and that's the reflex. That's the little neural spark that drops the diaphragm downward, that pushes our intestines down, allowing us to vacuum air with our lungs. That's anxiety. That's not excessive. That's just saying, okay, breathe now. And that is one of those things that autonomically occurs. Yes, we can suspend our breath, but autonomically occurs. That is anxiety. That's that sense of need to breathe, and not want to breathe, but need to breathe. And whenever we're talking about run-of-the-mill, day-to-day word used in quotes, anxiety, we're talking in excess. We're talking things that resemble social anxiety, agoraphobic responses. We're talking about things that may present in front of somebody and they get anxious, such as the bills, or seeing their children whenever maybe they haven't seen them for a long time. All of a sudden there's worry. And all of these things come up, and then we become anxious, so to speak. And we're learning in this book how to rewire, because whenever we do things, and we can rewire all the way down to the very dying moments of our life, our brain is still capable of not only healing itself, but creating new neural synapse connections. Then we're learning how to do synaptic training. Whenever we're learning how to do something new, and this is something that the FBI negotiator Chris Voss talks about, and he even demonstrates it if you see some of his lectures, wherever he's doing the thumbs up on one hand and the pointing the pistol with the other, and he's flipping back and forth, right to left, changing the hand position from gun right to thumbs up left, and then thumbs up right, and then guns left. And whenever you start feeling the difficulty of that, you go faster and faster, and you realize there's a little strain. You're feeling the discomfort of neural growth that's going on, because we're making connections for something, well, maybe we don't do or practice. And that is actually the foundation of what we feel when we're learning how to, I don't know, ride a skateboard, learn how to walk when we're a baby, and maybe even, in my case, learn martial arts and do something rather clumsily. And later on, it smooths out. It becomes easier. But we get a referential first-time synaptic growth that it feels uncomfortable. It feels like effort. It might even make us yawn and get tired, make our head hurt a little bit. And then we come back and now we're familiar. It's like, okay, I'm doing this. It doesn't get a whole lot easier, but it does get easier over time. And this is what we do in this book. We're learning how to recondition, retrain what it is that is the thing that causes the most stress and pain and suffering. And that's on an everyday basis, wherever I may worry about things. I may hyper-respond and over-respond to people that love me and care for me, and I may be snappish and ugly because I feel uncomfortable in the moment, especially if something changes too suddenly. The sudden onset can make me very vulnerable feeling. Not vulnerable necessarily, but feeling as if I am. And that can be considered a threat, especially if it's too much information. And if I'm already stressed, that's outside of my capacity or my bandwidth for the moment. So I focus on this sense or bandwidth limitation that we have cognitively to make sense of things whenever things are really super difficult, hard, pressuresome, scary, or making me feel vulnerable, or maybe I am vulnerable because it is threatening to me somehow, or I might perceive or expect it to be because of past experience. So lots to consider in this book, and much of it is taught as to how to go about, not only think about it, but also how to condition so that we can learn how to overcome those circumstances. Now, rewiring the anxious brain, it's neuroscience. It's the neuroscience of fear. That's nothing new. I've not invented anything new, but what I've put together is something as a system that works well on its own individual pieces and parts. But these, the way I put them together, work well together. And I've written it in a way that even if you, usually the first 12 chapters is how I teach the Running Man model. After that is application. After the first 12, how you read those, it's not so much a sense of order necessary, but it is one that if you have the foundation of the first 12 chapters, it will help you guide what it is that you're doing, even if you don't read all the chapters in the necessary order. But each one stands alone. Each one provides not only a lesson, but a conclusion that allows us to think in a way about what it is that's being taught with each short chapter. And they're not overwhelmingly long, but they are very instructive, and it's very personal, once again, in the way that it was written, the way I wrote it. And the next thing, how else does this book apply? Well, it teaches you how to overcome our paleo brain survival programming, and it kind of helps us with like conflict resolution. Conflict resolution is something that often gets overlooked or maybe overly focused on as a business thing, or it's looked at as kind of a passing thing that, it'll get better once you learn how to actively listen. There's so much more to it, because if you don't have your physiology under control, your communication is going to suffer. And most folks that teach this, and there are a lot of great books out there, mind you, on communication, conflict resolution, they do not point out this fact, and that is that conflict is not always one that's combative or painful, but often can arise out of our state and how we arrive. And that, by default, speaks of what communication is, and that it is a default option. That means it occurs before a word is ever spoken. And yes, we can say that body language speaks to us, and movement is the very first language of our body that's spoken, but how someone else moves teaches us and tells us things before the words are ever spoken. And that sense of gut level visceral trust or mistrust is something that may arise very quickly within fractions of a moment. And that can affect or even taint communication, and may even limit, somebody is trying to be truthful with us, but we just don't feel comfortable with their approach, how they physically are, and what they sound like, their tonals, before the message is ever given. But once again, conflict can arise often by how we arrive. But the communication, once again, is a default, and it happens before we can even get within even earshot of somebody speaking to us. And also, the desired outcome that I wanted from this book for somebody that reads it is, I don't like the term mental toughness, but it's definitely something that arises, and it's a resilience, yes, but it's not a callousness. It is one that's more about flexibility in response. And if you're flexible and able to move out of the way, you don't have to be tense. You don't have to feel like you're less than, because you're not going into things bearing your heart and getting into conflict head first, because that's just an approach. It's not the best approach. It's probably the worst one, because you wind up getting damaged. They get damaged. And strategically, in the martial arts, that's called a mutual slaying. That means both people take damage, and we don't want to do that. We don't want to damage someone else necessarily. We may like to if they've done something wrong to us, but we don't want to be part and parcel to that, and then we have to carry that memory or the karma of that, of course. So we want to have a better interaction, and this is what this book is about. How do I improve that interaction? So one of the fundamental questions that I ask myself is, am I reacting to my life, or am I strategically responding to it? And that's what we have to figure out. And if it's not a strategic response, which means I'm mindful, controlled, and also centered, and feel a sense of safety and still have that sense of I can still choose within the situation, then this is where this book will excel and help you learn how to manage and how to teach that to yourself. You don't have to go to someone else to do it. You don't have to go to a therapist and pay hundreds and hundreds of dollars over time to get answers, but yet the skill is still not there. Because this is something that is, in a sense, it has a field manual kind of feel to it, because it's about, well, how can I do this whenever I'm in the middle of it? And I am a therapist, have been for many years, but I will tell you that good therapists, no matter how good they are, they can't push you to the point wherever you make that leap to be able to apply these methods and cognitive behavioral tools, so to speak, in a situation that's difficult. You can strategize, but until you get there, you don't know. So these methods teach you how to condition your body in a way that you become more resilient physically. And yes, you can think on your feet and use those tools, and those tools are wonderful. I've counseled with them and taught them for many years, but they fail at some point, and that's when the heart rate goes up and when there's a sense of threat in the moment, and we default not to our lowest level of training. We do that. but we default to our systems. What are the systems I have in place and play that I practice most? If you have a very dysfunctional maladaptive system of responses, that's where you're going when stress gets high enough. As much as you might not want to, you may be stuck with a guilt and shame because you were trying and it failed. If you didn't practice enough, how can you hope to get better at dealing with things, especially if you have chronically stressful events, especially around family and jobs and stuff? And if you're in a catch-22 and you can't extricate yourself from that and leave, there are those that just leave and they have the luxury of that. There are some of us, such as myself, that couldn't, and we had to stick it out and stand and deliver, so to speak. And many times I wound up taking damage because I didn't know better. Now that I know better, wow, talk about having a sense of freedom and choice. It's very empowering. So if you're reacting to your life versus strategically responding to it, when conflict hits or a deadline looms, your heart races, your jaw tightens, and your mind blurs in an instant. Your paleo cave person, that wiring, it takes over. You enter a split-second survival mode, and it's driven by fear, panic, possibly aggression for that matter. It leaves you completely unable to think clearly or make sound decisions. Those decisions that we make under that duress can affect a lifetime. It can take a life, my own or that of another, if it is that strong. Most personal development advice tells you, like, change your mindset. If you change your mind, you can change everything. And that's true. But they're doing that with this presupposed idea of safety, that you can think that, and safety that you can change that, not necessarily training it such that the positive thinking tool is resilient itself. It won't fall apart if you don't teach it in a manner that you're stress inoculating not only your body, but also stress enhancing the tools you're trying to use under stress to see, well, when does it fall apart? And this is where the Running Man talks about this, because we become more aware of the fact that not all tools are perfect nor absolute. That is not true. They work to a point, and I don't like hearing it this way, until they don't. But rather, it's not so much that they don't work anymore, it's just that situation has changed and they're no longer applicable. They're still good tools, and we have to remember that. But whenever we're in that paleo cave person stress, things will fall apart, and know that. And you've already probably known that if you're even considering looking at this book, or even anything within the genre of post-traumatic stress, anxiety, and dealing with stress generally. You know that things work to a point. That's why sometimes we feel kind of left holding the bag, or maybe even empty-handed for that matter. Whenever things should work, then we go back to guilt and shame, and why we question ourselves. But not only that, we punish ourselves because I couldn't make it work, end quotes. And it's not that you couldn't, it's just that it didn't, and there was something missing. And part of it is that we have to have tools that do not fail just because of stress. They're not going to work perfectly 100% of the time, but if you don't practice them enough, they're not going to serve you well when you need them most. Most personal development advice tells you to change your mindset once again, but they also tell you think positive. This isn't that toxic positivity crap that people talk about. That's them just really from the heart of hearts wanting you to do better and change the quality of the thoughts, and that's okay. But in many senses of the word of wrong, they are that under stress. They're not while it's assumed safe and that it is safe. When it's not safe, things change. Now, we do have to have a sense of I can do this, a sense of capacity and self-efficacy and confidence. Those are some important things that we deal with too in this book. And that works pretty well into as to why this system works so well, is because all of these constituents are taken into consideration, and it's not all done at once, but we have to practice and repeat the skills so that way you can gain not only resilience whenever it is fight flight, but also we gain a larger degree of flexibility when things aren't so stressful. And we can still practice those tools, and it's health giving even whenever it's low stakes, and that's an important thing. True resilience operates on a strict biological hierarchy, and that's physiology first, psychology second. You can't argue that, and the science supports it. And if you want to look for it, please do. The other manuals I'll be putting out later, I'll be getting more into the academic weeds and putting up more of the scientific research stuff. I didn't put it in this book, and there's a reason, because I wanted this to be a book you can handle, not be intimidated by. And I did put some suggested reading material in there, and that is just something I'd like you to look at if you can. And I think they would do nothing but benefit you, because they're somatic first understandings. And I've got one of Robert Sapolsky's books in there as well, mentioned in the back background. And there's a couple that are martial arts books, but not necessarily showing you how to punch or kick, but rather they teach the importance of the power of the mind when used a certain way. And those are great ideas to expand on, mind you. As far as the transformative principles within the Running Man Self-Regulation Skills project that I'm doing right now, that book, The Running Man, Resiliency in the Face of Fight or Flight, reflects that, what I teach in this. I've been doing this for 3 years. I've been doing the teaching of self-regulation much longer. And this is really not strictly what I teach in the podcast, but very reflective of the principles that I teach in this podcast throughout the years. And it's something that can be nothing but helpful to yourself and those that you would like to share this with. Now, a couple of small points I'd like to make about this book as well is that it's written for people, professionals, parents, anybody that's needing split-second control whenever you're making decisions that can be stressful. It's great for conflict and leadership as well. It's great for negotiation, social dynamics, and also if you have to do high-pressure decision-making, that can be family, not just business and at work, and things that happen just right away in a fraction of a moment. And the focus of this book really is more active tactical deployment during acute pressure, right when it's happening. And that's whenever things become dicey and whenever we need help the most. But the long-term effects of these events are the things that often causes long-term stress, anxiety, post-trauma reactivity sometimes. And these are the things that I was focusing on helping people learn, well, not only how to regulate, but how to minimize the stressful effects of. And I believe I've done it in this book. And I'm sharing this with you with hopes that you'll share it as well. I'm going to put the link up in the description of this podcast today. And I'm just so happy to share it with you. I was just so tickled and realizing just what a big accomplishment this was. It's good for me. But above and beyond that, I think that this will be really helpful to you. And we're going to go and close out this podcast for today. And I want to tell you, it's 10:23 p.m. here in Central West Texas. We're in a tornado watch right now. 65 to 75 mile an hour winds. It's kind of noisy out there. Dust storm the whole bit. And we're expecting rain here tonight at 2300 or 11 p.m. And certainly hope that everything goes down well here locally. And I just want to tell you all thank you. If you are listening to this podcast, thank you for riding with me. I appreciate your listenership. On top of that, I appreciate you letting me share the Running Man book that I've finally gotten out in print. And I hope that you consume it and share it with people. There'll be other ones that'll be coming out, and there's some teaching to be done. I will let y'all know here on the podcast beyond what I'm already doing, and that may be something that comes in the future where I'm doing more some one-on-one consulting. But most definitely, hey, if you have any feedback, any questions or any concerns, or you just want to say hello to me from whatever part of the world you're in, please do. Just send it to the email at runningmangetskillsproject@gmail.com. I would love to hear from you. And once again, the book is called The Running Man, Resiliency in the Face of Fight and Flight. And I will be probably on some of the other channels doing a little snippet readings here and there of the book, so that way you can listen. And I'm certainly going to probably share some as we move forward. But thank you again for your listenership and just riding along with me. It's been my pleasure and certainly a privilege on my part. And I get to do the podcast. That is such a blessing. And take care on whatever you do. Don't stress. Get the book, The Running Man, and make me smile a lot. And take care. Walk well.